Welcome back. This is Keith B. Dixon, and I want to thank you for coming back for another webinar on Perfectly Clear and how I use it in my workflow. So today we're going to be talking mostly about landscape images, and if you guys would chime in and just let me know what type of landscape, is it environmental landscape, people landscape, let me know what you're shooting, and I'll be addressing questions probably around the bottom of the hour, so about 3:30 Pacific Standard Time. I'll be just looking in on your questions. If you're watching a recorded version of this, which will come afterwards, I just want to thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen to my presentation and my presentation on Perfectly Clear. So let's get started. I got a lot of information to cover, and I want to start out by saying typically, depending on the level of the project I'm going to use is really going to dictate the quality of the equipment. So I'm going to run through a bunch of lens choices from the least expensive to the most expensive that I use, and just kind of briefly talk about why I use those particular lenses and the problems that you can run into on the lower end. And I'm going to show you some projects mostly photographed with lower end lenses on the road. So that should be real interesting. I'm going to show you how I had to deal with them and what I had to do in Perfectly Clear to bring the images to, a certain level of quality. So let's go ahead and get started. And I'm just going to open this up. I usually like to start out with a slideshow, and I'm just going to run through the slides really quick so you kind of get an idea. If you haven't heard my presentation before, you kind of get a quick idea about who I am and what I do. So I'm a commercial photographer, which means I primarily focus on corporate event and corporate portraiture. It's my specialty. I've worked with a lot of national companies and international companies as well. So I shoot a lot of corporate events and print on site as well. So I will do these corporate events and then print the images from that event on site, right on location there with the crew of photographers. So that's my specialty. You can find me on social media, Twitter being my biggest network, which is approximately over 30,000 followers, pretty active. And I just want you to know that if you're on Twitter, definitely follow me. I'll follow you back. Mention Athentech and Perfectly Clear. That'll definitely get my attention, or mention that you saw this webinar, and I will definitely get you a follow back and engage you as well. So Twitter, at Keith B. Dixon. I'm also on Facebook. So you can friend me on Facebook. It's just Keith B. Dixon. And also Examiner.com, which is not so much a photography site as much as it is a media site. And it's very popular with my following. And it's very dedicated, very hardcore. Usually I'm writing my opinion about things on Examiner.com. And definitely, so if you want to know something about pricing, product, whatever the case may be, good location. Pinterest, which is it's basically, I like to say, a collection of what I do. So if you want to see what I do as a whole, that'd be a good place to go. And then Google Plus, which is tied into my commercial blog. So a lot of the information that you'll see passing through there will be commercial oriented ideals and philosophies and thoughts and all that good stuff. All right, so we're going to be talking about landscape photography and building an image for it. It's very important. The type of equipment you use for landscape photography is very important. So because you can't control a lot of the conditions. And I'm going to say that if you're considering landscape photography, you should definitely make the investment in the best gear possible, but you should also shoot with the gear that is not so great as well, so you can feel the difference between the two and you're going to know why you're spending your money. So before I jump into file structure, let me just make sure that everyone can hear me. That's going to be important. Let's just, I'm going to go down here really quick and check. Okay, everything is looking good here. Fantastic. All right. So before we get started, I want to talk about something really important, which is file structure. I haven't mentioned in the past, but I'm actually a Netgear ambassador. So I use Netgear storage, Netgear communication devices, everything Netgear. So I want you to know that your protection of your image or your client's images should be number one. So whatever you do, and I like to start this out in my presentations by saying, develop an effective workflow that will allow you to back up your images and edit them and find them, archive them, do all the things that you need to do. And one of the ways I do that is right from the beginning. Not only do most cameras have double card slots now, which will allow you to create an instant backup right there on the camera, but in addition to that, what I do is I back up immediately from my source, which is the camera, onto some external backup drive. It could be a thumb drive, a disk, whatever the case may be, and then onto the destination drive. And typically, what I'll do, and I'm going to show you this really quick. What I normally do is, if I'm on the road, you see this Netgear cloud. This is my Netgear cloud, and what I do is I upload those images right away into the cloud. So if somebody was to, God forbid, snatch my camera bag or whatever may happen, I have the images stored on this drive in the cloud. And this is a private cloud. It goes directly to my house, actually. So it's not a third party. It's not like a Dropbox or anything like that. This is my own private cloud. And I want you to know that. So that's a great product by Netgear. I had to throw that shameless plug in there because it really is a great product, and you should definitely look into it. Okay. So as I mentioned, I'm a commercial photographer. So we're going to be talking about architectural. Here's my architectural site. It's actually keithbdixon.net. And these are just some of the things that I do: residential, commercial, and landscapes. And also the commercial event site. And also I have a wedding brand that, so I have a group of photographers that work with me, and we photograph weddings under the Event Photographic brand. So there you go. Okay, so let's get out of there, and we're going to go right back into the slideshow. Okay, so here's our presentation overview, just to kind of give you a feel of what we're going to talk about. We're mostly going to be working in Lightroom. I know there's other programs out there. Lightroom is the predominant program in terms of what people are using. It's what I'm using right now, so it kind of makes sense. But there are other programs out there, such as Photo Mechanic and maybe a few others. If you know, you can chime in and put those out in the questions. But the file structure that I just showed you will work with anything, and that's the beauty of it. Adobe could go out of business tomorrow. If your file structure is in place, you can plug in something else. So keep that in mind. All right. So today we're going to focus on image quality and corrections. Perfectly Clear is a great program for creating corrections, whether you're doing it initially or on the back end. Maybe you've gone through a full-blown creative edit, and you just want to make sure there's no dust on top of your image. And when I say dust on top, if you're sanding down a piece of wood and it's smooth, it's looking good, it's everything that you need it to be, you might need to just take that little air gun and just blow off the dust. Well, Perfectly Clear is actually perfect for that as well. So you can use it on the front end or the back end, and I'm going to show you that. I'm going to show you how you can use it when you're creating HDR, so that you create a good image going in, or a good foundation going in. All right, so let's go right over to Lightroom, and I want to share an image with you that was photographed with a Nikon lens. According to Ken Rockwell, a lot of you guys may have heard of Ken Rockwell. He does a lot of lens reviews, and he basically, let me bring this lens up here. Ken Rockwell said this lens here that I'm showing on screen is probably one of the worst lenses Nikon's ever made. And you know what? I'm going to have to agree with him. I'm a diehard Nikon fan. I love it. I mean, I'm dedicated to the product, but this was definitely not a great lens. And there are terms in landscape photography such as pincushion, barrel distortion, chromatic aberration, which is kind of present in a lot of the consumer lenses. Those are things that really kind of come back to haunt you when you go into post-processing and you drop a heavy edit on your work. I mean, as you enlarge out to 100%, you just start to see the image disintegrate. Literally, I like to use that word disintegrate because it creates a tension. It just starts to disintegrate. And there are other variables outside of the lens. It could be the lighting condition. It could be um, the fact that you're not using a tripod, vibration. So it's not just the lens's fault, right? There are a lot of other variables, and you literally have to create a checklist in your mind and get those variables under control as much as you can. And as you can see here in this one particular image, um, there's a lot of distortion in here, and this is actually corrected. This is best as I could do. I mean, I could probably go into Photoshop and liquefy that down a little bit, which would affect this stuff over here. Um, Pretty intensive work. The ideal behind this shot was I was in Seattle. This is the first Starbucks store ever opened. And this shot is almost impossible because it's always busy. There's always cars in front. It's just ridiculously busy. And I'm going to show you in the shots before. So I was shooting the 24 to 120, and it started to rain a little bit. And I walked by and I saw these people in the store, which was very unusual. And I'm going to show you the bracketed versions of this shot. Right, I saw these people in the store. I was like, wow, that just never happened. So you know what? I set up really quick, and it started to rain. I couldn't really swap out the lens, so I had to go with the 24 to 120. You could see where it's literally just bowing right there. So we've got, you know, a little barrel distortion going on right there. I mean, you can see it at the bottom. This is pretty bad. You can see it at the top where you get the pin cushioning. A lot of stuff going on. The other thing too is with these lenses that are variables, 3.5s, 5.6, you've literally got to find the perfect glass inside the lens, the perfect grouping, perfect f-stop, and that's where your sweet spot is going to be for sharpness and clarity, and you won't get refraction and chromatic aberrations. All that stuff will be reduced down to a minimum. So I literally shot this at f11, and typically it's 2 stops from the smallest f-stop number. So smallest f-stop number, 2 stops is generally the sweet spot. And what that means is that when your aperture is wide open, you're letting a lot of light in. So from that point to your smallest opening inside the lens, which in this case is not the smallest here, but f11 is pretty small, I knew that I would get some type of sharpness, and I'd have to slow down my shutter speed. As you can see, I'm a 1/4 of a second. That's why we got the blurring in there. Well, when I'm creating, and here's a tip for you, when I'm creating HDR, a lot of people will just pick out their bracketed shots and go right into whatever program they're using, Photoshop, Photomatic. There's a ton of them out there. What I like to do is make corrections right in here. And the natural thing to do is to go into Lightroom, pick the eyedropper, and pick on something gray or something close to it, right? From here, this looks like the grayest. Maybe we could click on the latte part, you know, to see. The thing that as you can see, we got kind of like that magenta feel in the background. The thing I like to do is to zoom in to 1:1 so I can really see what's going on here. And here's a white area, which is going to be neutral to everything else. That looks, you know, I've been in Starbucks a million times. That looks like their lighting right there. Zoom back out. But who wants to do all of that? That's going to slow us down. Imagine if we've got to do this for 100 images. We're going to be here all day doing this, right? Now, I would say that's pretty accurate, and what I could do is sync it across, but I don't want to do that, right? So just an approach would be to take these images. I'm going to reset this first one right here. The natural thing that I do now is I go in and basically export out, and there's a lot of ways to export to perfectly clear. Well, there's a few ways, right? You can go right into export, and this is probably one of my favorite because it has the most control, in my opinion. And you can do what's called a batch by just clicking on that button, and the images will come back in based on what you selected. So let's say we want to fix the tint. In this case, we do. If I didn't want to go into perfectly clear, I just knew exactly what I was going to do. I could do this and the images would pop right back in. But I'm going to click this off because I want to show you how easier it is to do this. So we're going to click export. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to save this. And organization is really the key, right, to anything that you do. And what I normally do is I just create a folder called corrected. And in my workflow webinars, this is something that I go into in great detail. And I just drop it right in there, click choose, right? And generally, if I'm going straight out to the client, I'm going to export this out as a JPEG, right? If I know this is, I'm doing a corporate event, maybe a live upload in the moment, I'm going to go right out to a JPEG. In a creative sense, I'm looking at, maybe I'm going to print this down the road. I'm going to go out as a TIFF file, and you can rename in here as well. So you can do a lot of different things. So I would just go down here and change that to a TIFF file. I use Pro RGB for the color profile, and according to Adobe Classroom in a book, and I think in the first 1 or 2 chapters, they talk about Pro Photo RGB as being a wider color gamut for the printer. You won't be able to tell the difference, but it's definitely a wider color gamut. And we could just leave zip the same, 16-bit. This is going to vary depending on the type of computer you're using. For the purposes of this demonstration, I'm actually using a MacBook Air because that's what I travel with most of the time. So everything's on here. But at home, it's a little bit different, bigger systems. And then you're just going to click export. And we're working with raw files here. I believe we're on, these are going to be, let me see what these are. I believe these are going to be NEF files or raw files. NEF. Oh, okay, so these are JPEGs, but we'll work with some NEF files so you can really kind of get an idea for what the processing is like. And let me see here. All right, looks like we're doing pretty good. I'm just going to turn off this mail thing here. All right, here we go. Let me just turn off my mail. All right, so here we have the images that basically came up in Perfectly Clear. And just give me a second here just to make this one little correction. There we go. Okay, now there's a lot of approaches that we could take here. Basically, we know we want to fix the tint, and we're not going to do anything else with this other stuff because we came in here to fix the tint. And there's a bunch of ways you can look at that. You can just click right on it. And as you can see, there's a huge difference right there. Pretty much the same effect. I want to say automatic. And that's the one thing I love about Perfectly Clear is it makes really good decisions, or what we call intelligent decisions, about how to process your images. And we can sync this setting all the way across. And let's say maybe we saw this tone a little different with our naked eye, right? And all we'd have to do is just go right up to our tint correction button here under color. So in landscape, you're pretty much going to be working in these 3 areas right here, right? And if you slide it all the way over to the bottom, all the way over to the right, all the way over to the left, you really get to see the high and the low in terms of what it's going to produce. So yeah, I kind of like what Perfectly Clear did. So I'm just going to leave it just like that. And then all I would do literally is click the Save All button and bring that back in. Now this is my HDR that I'm working on. I just want to get my color correction right. And that's the general idea of using Perfectly Clear this way. And as you can see, there's some people there, and I literally waited till those people cleared out, and I'm gonna just cancel that out. So just so you know, I'm gonna fast forward you to the image that I'm about to show you. These 3 images right here are bracketed images that I used. To basically create this shot right here. And it's an HDR shot, and there's a lot to be said about HDR. Some people, can get into really over processing an image. It's definitely a thing that you do to taste. It's still pretty popular. As an architectural photographer, I still blend my images. And the thing that I want you to know about HDR is not something that just popped onto the scene. The software did, but way back before we were actually we would bracket out our shots and blend them together in Photoshop. Just the highlights and the highs, the lows, the mids, we blend those all in Photoshop. It took longer. So now we have all these software programs that have speeded up the process. It's great. So here's the final images. As you can see, it looks pretty clean, but we still have a lot of distortion. And that's the possibility, so that we get the right color correction. And if I was to take this image, let's say I went through and I made all of these changes and corrections to everything, right? What I could do is, remember I told you about sanding down a piece of wood and the dust, right? Well, if I go into perfectly clear and maybe I want to tighten this image up a little bit just to make sure I didn't create any color cast or any additional problems that I may or may not need, I'm going to use perfectly clear to finish my image. And I like to call it perfectly clear a finisher, right? We're going to finish with that. We're going to check to see if everything is okay. I didn't create any color cache or blow out any pixels or any of that kind of stuff that we tend to do in editing sometimes. And the reality is sometimes you may never know until you actually go to print, and then you'll see some things happening. So here's the image, right? That's where we were, and here's where we are. And I kind of like that. I think based on what I've seen, I mean, we've got the grittiness of the window. If we look at here, we don't see it as much as we see it here. I mean, that could be confused. And I'm just basically clicking on the screen. That's basic. Somebody could say, oh, was his lens dirty, right? So that's how I'm making the choice on this right here, because you can see that obviously the window just has some weathering on it. And that's what makes this beautiful. And there's other ways to look at it. We can look at it side by side if you just really want to get a good feel for, what this is going to do. This is my favorite. I actually like to do this at the trade shows. Are you convinced? Did we convince you that this is the right way to go? Right? Okay, so there we have it. There's our final. And if you want to know what I use for this, I'll definitely tell you. I used a program called Photomatix. It's just something you have to play with. There's tutorials out there that kind of take you through the sliders, but perfectly clear. Photomatix, a little bit of Photoshop, a little bit of Lightroom, and that's this image right here. All right, let's take a look at some more. Here's actually, by the way, that last image was in Seattle. Here's another one. This image is really interesting because I shot this in 2011, by the way, which is kind of interesting, and that just speaks to the archive system and the way that I've kind of put things together. So 2011, when I really first started getting into the whole landscape thing and shooting street photography, and when I say getting into it, like I got aggressive. Like I'm gonna start really making it a part of what I do in photography outside of everything else. So I'm in Las Vegas in the Venetian or the Palazzo, one of those hotels, whatever it may be. And I'm with my wife, and she doesn't want to stop and wait for me to take pictures. She kind of wants to get to wherever she's going, and so I got to shoot pretty quick. And the thing that I want you to know is we can go in here and basically pick a neutral area, right? Again, here's that. Didn't really do too much. I could go over here to all of my presets, and you've seen me do those of you have you see me go through the whole. Oh, that works, right? There's perfect Keith notch up. That's so I'll know that that's an edit or a slider combination that I like to use a lot, right? Enlarge, but it really didn't do too much for the color. It just doesn't totally pop. It corrected the problem, but the image is not really popping. So I'm just going to reset that, and I'm going to take this image into perfectly clear to show you how much easier it is to bring this image to life without having to do all the thinking. And I'm all for, I'm definitely a manual type of photographer. I like to be technical when necessary, but sometimes automation is perfect. It's the perfect tool for getting things done. There we go. So just on the detail slider alone, I got the same result. Literally didn't have to think about it as much. And if I wanted to play around, right, I actually like fixed tint. I think it just pops the colors out, right? And I could literally go in. Here's my first 3 sections. I could literally go in here and just add a little bit. I want you to be careful with this sharpening because people tend to overdo it. It looks good here, right? But if we take it up to 100%, right, you start to see where the pixels are so sharp around the edges, it looks like sandpaper or texture, right? And one of the things you can do is you just turn on noise here. Turn on the noise slider, right? And see what it does. Play with it, right? Takes a minute, right? So I just basically we're going to soften the edges. That's kind of what noise does. It softens the pixel edges. And at this point, we can just back off the sharpening until it just looks more natural. And that's the thing. Does the photo look natural, right? There we go. Probably around here. And I'm on a MacBook Air, so it's not going to be as responsive. That looks pretty natural. We're at 95%. I know that's going to print well, right? I'm going to back out. And you know what? Maybe I want to pump up the colors just a tad bit, right? There we go. Maybe just a little too much, right? You can play around with Vivid, right, to really give it the pop. As you can see, it kind of darkened the darkest reds, right? Okay, maybe that works right there. So if I like that setting and I know that's something I'm going to be using all the time, I can go in here and basically create a preset. And I like the number mines. I'm going to call this 500 landscape. Oops. And I'm going to call this total fix. I don't know. I just come up with these crazy things to kind of help me remember. Okay, so we'll just call it total fix. You can call it whatever you want to for the description. And then I'm going to actually save that one. And when you go right click into Perfectly Clear as opposed to export, it'll reload that image right in next to it. And sometimes when you go the other direction where you're exporting the image basically this way, right, you have to pick the destination and all the other stuff. And then here, oops, we didn't want that to open. And then here, it'll load the image right back, right next to it. Okay, so let's go here. And I'm going to walk you through that one more time, just so you know, right? So we can just right click, edit in, Perfectly Clear, right? And this dialog box will open up. And if I'm going to say if you're printing, I would definitely choose a TIFF file, 240 zip file, edit in, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you just how easy this is with the preset. As you can see, the image is opening up there, right? And there's our image. And if, let's say it was the image looked like that, say the image looked like that, right? We can just go right down here and pick 500 landscape as our preset, and we could actually batch that across our images, literally, and it would apply it individually to each one, right? Click that save button, and sometimes when you bring this back into Lightroom, it takes a minute for Lightroom to synchronize, right? There's our image, right? It's making the adjustment, right? I'm going to click on masters. I'm going to synchronize that. Okay, so it'll bring Lightroom back, it'll bring the image back into Lightroom, and I'm going to flag that and just bring it side by side. Just kind of give you an idea here. Right, and you see the difference there? I don't think these, oh, there we go. Okay, so you see where it just kind of opened up the image. And if we just bring those side by side, you can definitely see the difference there. So we just opened it up. I'm going to show you some images that are dark and what happens when you open them up just too much, right? You open up too much detail, the kind of things that could happen, and the kind of things that will definitely show up in your printing as well. So, all right. Let me check in. We're right at the bottom of the hour, so let me just check in. Looks like we're doing really good. Hope you guys are picking up some valuable nuggets here. Okay. So let's talk about batching really quick. Or actually, let me show you. I'm going to show you one more concept. This is a real fast one. Okay, so here is the new expansion that they just built for the Bay Bridge. And as you can see, there's just some nice little lighting effects going on here. And one of the ways you can use, let's say you shot 20 of these, but you don't know which one works because maybe the water's moving, maybe something happened, maybe the clouds changed. Who knows? Whatever the reason may be, right? Perfectly Clear can analyze each image and apply that correction based on that image setting or exposure, right? So if we take this image and we take it into Perfectly Clear, right? And I'm just going to take the shortcut, bring it back, right? Click at it. And in the meantime, I'm going to import my webinar corrected folder. See that folder right there? All right. So it just imported my corrected folder, the one I made earlier. Okay, here's our Bay Bridge shot, and as you can see, it just went right to the default. Well, that's a good color, but that's probably a better color because I mean we have difference in contrast in terms of the light, the tonal values, right? And that's just a real simple. You see that? Just clicking on detail, and you'll notice that you'll start to see this little halo starting to develop, and that's where your image is basically losing its resolution because of whatever the case may be, the lens I shot. We're pretty safe right there. If we go to 100%, it's still pretty good. That's going to print, go to 100. That's going to print okay. I mean, there's some things going on in there. It's a little grainy. I mean, we could go in here and fix the noise, right? Fix the tint and basically fix the noise from here. Either way, you can adjust the tint from here or fix the noise from here. However you want to do it to your liking, you can do that right in here. And I want to say these first 3 boxes right here is where you're gonna live in terms of making your adjustments, right? So if we wanted to just tone down the noise, right? We just click on that noise box and we can go night scene. And I want to caution you on, when you're doing any type of sharpening or noise reduction, and let's just sharpen that up and I'll show you exactly what I mean. You see that? That's going to definitely show up in print, and it's just not going to look that great. And the further you go out, the more you kind of see where the image is just over sharpened, and you can see it's just not effective, right? And that's going to be anything that you use, right? A lot of times the lens quality also has a lot to do with this as well. And just recently, I've been using a Rokinon, and I'll show you. Let me just kind of give you an idea of what the Rokinon. I'm going to just click cancel here. Just give you an idea of what the Rokinon looks like. Here's a Rokinon 14mm prime. It's about, you can find one on Craigslist for $250, right? It's a great lens in terms of sharpness. And if you're just really trying to pump up your pixels in whatever program you're using, and you're using perfectly clear, it's going to allow you to do it to a certain extent. But it's very time consuming to work with this lens because it's all manual, and it's you just got to kind of know what you're shooting into and what you're doing to really work with this lens. But I will tell you, it's sharp at f8, f11, depending on your lighting circumstance. There's that one element of glass in that lens. I mean, it pops. I mean, I've shot some, I could show you some side by sides with Nikon 14 prime and this lens, and you won't be able to tell the difference. So it's possible. You just have to work for it, and I just want you to know that. So let's go back to Lightroom. All right, let's talk about batching. So batching is a great feature, especially if you travel a lot. And I'm going to just bring up these images that I made in Puerto Rico. So here's some images I made in Puerto Rico, just to kind of tell the story of Fort Cristobal, which is a Spanish fort that was right on the beachfront, protecting the inner harbor of Puerto Rico, and it's real popular. Definitely got to have your exercise on before you get there, because walking up those little walkways they're definitely steeper than they really look, and it's up pretty high. But let's say you're out, you want to tell a story. Maybe you're going to do not a print competition, but you're going to do a gallery showing, and this is part of what you want to show, right? And you've got 500 or 600 of these images from your vacation, right? The thing you can do is just take these images, and I'm going to take these out this way, and basically you can click hide perfectly clear, right? Fix tint. So we're just going to assume that there's a problem with the tint because we looked at the images already, and we're gonna basically select a folder. And just to make this really simple for the import part, I'm going to create a subfolder, and I'm going to call this Puerto Rico. right? We always say PR. And we're going to export. Now, these are NEF files. These are Nikon RAW files. And you see the right here at the bottom where it says NEF. So I just want to show you the processing time. Generally, when you're using a lot of software programs, most of the time for the sake of, just making it run faster and look better, a lot of companies will use JPEG files. Well, I like to put things to the test in terms of what it's really going to do, because I'd hate for you to send me a Twitter. I'm on Keith at I'm at Keith B. Dixon, and or an email at keith@keithbdixon.com and say, hey, I bought this program. It runs really slow, right? So I want you to see what it is in real time, and this is what it is. And I want to tell you that I've processed. I only shoot raw files. I'm going to say never. I never shoot an actual JPEG file, never. So I'm processing thousand of these photos, and sometimes I'll just run them through and go sit down somewhere and do something else, or a couple hundred, whatever the case may be, and just let it run, and then they'll pop right back into perfectly clear if I click the hide box, or they will basically just reappear on a synchronization. So it just kind of depends on what I'm doing, and as that's working, right, I'm just going to take you right back to the lens choices, right? So here's one of my favorite lenses. I use this architecturally because it doesn't distort, right? I don't generally have that pin cushion or a lot of those other problems, minimal chromatic aberrations. And that's where you see those funny lines around the outside of the building or the trees. They're like little pink lines. They look like halos around your primary subject items. Here's another one, the 14 prime. So I'm going to tell you that if you're going to buy lenses, invest in the best, right? Invest in the best. These lenses are pretty expensive. I think this one is about $1,500–$1,600 new. This is a couple $1,000s, and it really is a great lens. So typically around $300. I mean, if you're on a budget, and I would say start out with this. If you haven't shot it, start out with this lens, and it'll teach you a lot. That's the one thing I do like about the RAW. I learned a lot about distortion and what to do and what not to do. It's a perfect training tool. And then here's that 24-120 that I was telling you about, and it's just in a good condition. It's great, but also very difficult to work with. Okay, so let's go back and look at our images. Okay, so here we go. Perfectly Clear has now brought the images back. So that was our batch process, right? As you can see, I had to rush to kind of get that explanation out about the lenses. And Lightroom. Let's try this again. Okay, looks like we're having... Okay, there we go. There's Lightroom. Okay, so now all I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm just going to synchronize this folder to kind of bring in those images that I processed. And remember, we created a folder called PR. There's our images right there, and our 11 images. And I'm just going to open this up wide so we can really kind of see what happened, and I'll show you the after images. The one thing I like about Perfectly Clear is I'm just able to do a lot of the simple things really quick. And that's what I want you to really know about, why you would basically purchase this program. So as you can see, they look pretty rich, and I'm going to take you through. Let's do a comparison. This image is really good because I know how it looked before. I'm actually going to take this image and I'm going to show you a comparison just so you can see what Perfectly Clear did. Here's our original right here, right? I'm just going to drag that over to, and all I did was Command N to create a collection down here that I just call pick, right? And just going to highlight and put those side by side. And as you can see, there's a big difference. So we just got a lot, just in correcting the tint and all the other little color cast things that were going on. This is the result right here. It's like night and day. That's much better. And you can see that there's a lot of light bouncing off the water from the sky that's creating a cast that's bouncing up on here. I mean, it's just a lot of stuff going on out here. It's difficult. And I think when I shot this, I was basically using, I even had on filters, and I was shooting on auto. When I'm out in the environment, I shoot a lot on auto so I could really focus on what it is I need to do. So there's the difference. And if we go back and just kind of look at the other images, right? You'll notice it just pop a whole lot more. And you can see I've got a filter on because it's not the greatest day out there. It had just rained in Puerto Rico, and skies cleared up, so it just wasn't the greatest situation, but it was ultra bright. So that's that vignetting that you see around the edges from the filter. This is a tough shot, and one of the reasons why I showed this because there's such a great difference between the sky and the bottom. But Perfectly Clear goes in and just renders that perfectly without really messing up the image. It's almost like the program is thinking for you. It's kind of scary, but it's a great tool to have. This is actually one of my favorite images because of the composition. That lady actually followed me around, which was kind of interesting. There weren't that many people in the fort at that time because it had just finished raining. But yeah, this is a tough one, right? Let's take a look at this. And we'll just go pick two. So I want to show you this image because this is normally I wouldn't have shot this, but for just for the sake of getting the position of the shot, this is how it actually looked right here. Oh, let me make sure I'm in the right place. Yep. Just drag that over to pics, and voila. Okay. And then, so here's the difference between the two. And this is a difficult image because the sky is literally blowing out in the background, but you see how Perfectly Clear goes in and just cleans up the foreground just perfect. Look at that. Look at the difference between here and there. And that's one of the reasons why I picked this image. This was actually, I don't delete my images, even if if they're completely blown out and lost, I'll delete them. But if it's just marginal, like maybe there's just one big issue that I know I'm not going to fix, I'll just keep it anyway. But as you can see, there's a big difference between these two images. So this is Perfectly Clear, just correcting the tint, right? And we're in a little bit of detail loss there, even in Lightroom, if we were to go in and basically turn this image, turn down the highlights, right? And we're going to recover just a little bit, right? But it just completely changed the whole tone of the image. And maybe we turn down the whites. We can bring a little bit of the detail back in the sky, increase the clarity, right? You notice I like to get all the way over on the slides because I want to know exactly how it's going to be affected. And sometimes you can't see those subtle changes. And this is an addition. If I really needed this image, and that's what I'm saying, if it's marginal, save it, because you could actually, as technology advances, the ability to work your images is going to be even greater. So probably somewhere around in there. And in this case, I'm just going to bump the exposure just slightly, right? That's probably as good as it's going to get. I mean, this is pretty much probably the real situation because it was cloudy there. So there's really nothing there to get to. Pretty interesting stuff. Perfectly Clear. And that's what I really love about the program. And I'm going to share another little tip with you. If you have, watch out for those spots on your lenses, right? Because if it's raining, windy, whatever, sometimes dust, your lens is like a dust magnet. You see the dust right there? So all you got to do is click on Visualize Spots and just click on, I'm going to just lower that brush down just a little. A little bigger. And I'm just going to go in here and get those spots out. And, I've done this a little while, so I can kind of identify kind of what's a spot and what's not. It happens a lot in landscape. And just click the done button, and those spots are gone. The thing that I want to tell you, though, is go in and enlarge, always, to look at exactly how your change is affected. As you can see, there's a lot of, it's a little grainy from the sharpening, right? So that's why the image is not going to work in the grand scheme of things, right? But if you're just going to put this online, you want to show some people, your vacation photos, you can go down here to noise reduction. And I want to tell you, noise reduction kind of creates that soft, almost painterly kind of feeling. So as you can see the difference there. So you don't want to do it too much, right? If we're going to be online with this photo and maybe we just want to show people what we did and we want to clean it up, I mean, we could use this image, but as far as printing it, it's going to be kind of rough, right? Even if we, try to crop some perspective, I'm just going to use 5x7 here, maybe just to kind of get a feel of, the location, right? There you go. All right, we got time for one more image, and I'm going to check in with you guys. Okay, looks like we're doing good. All right, fantastico. Okay, so let's go and let's bring up one image. I'm going to bring up a popular image here on the West Coast that you see a lot on reality TV, and it's the 5th Street Bridge down in LA. I mean, it's been shot a million times, and I'm going to show you this image. Did I bring that one with me? Yeah, here we go. Okay. Here's an image that I photographed for my 2212 project. Not this particular one. This is actually a reject image, and I want to show you some things about processing that you should be aware of whenever you're, processing, so that you don't over process your images. And the thing that I want to tell you, sometimes when you're applying your changes, zoom in to 1:1, because this is how the image actually looks, and zoom around in there and see what's going on, right? Do you see pixelation, chromatic aberrations, and just really just slide through. I like to focus on particular things in my image in terms of when I'm adjusting my sharpness. So typically I'm going to focus on something near, so that is extremely sharp. And then when I go into post-processing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at that area and see just kind of how my lens performed. And as you can see, this has, just zooming in, it looks kind of cloudy a little bit, right? Is it cloudy because of the sky? Is it cloudy because of whatever the case may be? What's happening? And these things like right here, you also want to get those out. If you have any airplane trails or any of that kind of stuff, you want to get that stuff out. And you can see this image is breaking apart. Now, here's the interesting thing about this one particular photo. I used a 24-85 on a full frame, and I think this might have been a D610 that I shot this on, a D600. 24-85. People don't generally shoot landscapes on 24-85s, but I wanted to see how it was going to perform and what I could get from it, so that when I'm talking about landscape photography at any level, I'm going to be able to relate, because not everyone's going to have a Zeiss lens or the $2,000 24-14. Keith, what can I do with my 16-35, and what should I be aware of, so that I can practice my craft and learn some things before I invest money in something as big as a $2,000 lens, which is more than what most cameras cost, right? So here's our image, and this is finished, right? I saved it as a TIFF. And what I like to do at this point, because I push these pixels basically to the edge here. And again, this is the 5th Street Bridge in Los Angeles. If you're over there, just walk basic. I think it's north. So it's going north, downtown, right up to the, I think this is the 405 freeway. Yeah, 405. And it's a great place to create photographs. There's no fencing or railings right there. I mean, you could literally lean over and you're in traffic. Well, not literally, but you can. Okay, so here's our image, and we're just going to bring that into perfectly clear, just like this, by right-clicking or Control. I'm going to leave it as a TIFF file. 240 is good. Zip. Open with the adjustments. And open it right up. This is a mega file too. TIFF files can be really big. This one is, so as you can see, it's 6,000 by 4,000. I shot it at 20 seconds f11, right? 100 ISO, so really low ISO. And I don't have the file size set up here, but I think this file is pretty big. And let's take a look at what we have. Okay, so here's our image. That's what we have. Remember I told you it looked like it was either foggy or cloudy? So Lightroom immediately corrected that issue. That looks pretty good. I mean, we have some spots here that I could clean off, right? Let's go into just the presets and take a peek here. So if we click on fix tint, that works. Let's zoom in. I'm going to go to 100% and see how that adjustment fixed or didn't fix my image. Still pretty much looks about the same. And this is going to print pretty, this will be a decent print, right? This is 100%. Looks pretty good, right? All right. Let's look at it side by side. So that's where we are now, right? If we open, let's say we had a dark image and we open up, probably not going to work. That obviously that doesn't look right, right? Landscape. The thing that I want you to know about the landscape preset is just going to kind of darken up. If you're, I like to think that the assumption is that it's a great, you're shooting at the perfect time, and we just need to darken some of those highlights. You'll notice it just kind of darkened our trees and our detail, which I think probably needed to happen in this case. So landscape is a good option here. I like fixed tint. If we like both, right, we can just go over here and just work in these 3 boxes and basically adjust our tint from here, right? You see that? So it doesn't require a lot, right? And we can also adjust our exposure up on our image or down, right? So if we want to go for that sexy nighttime look, that could pull it off for us. And we could also save that as a preset, right? Details tend to bring out the shadows. Vivid tends to increase the shadows. Boom, dark, light, right? So it's just one way to look at this HD feature. Increasing shadows, decreasing shadows. Sometimes I'll play around and I'll use the beauty just to see kind of what it's going to do. You just never know. It might just drop on that special effect. So we can rule out these 3 right here. We don't. Let's check for noise. We can go right in here and basically click on the noise button. Noise is detected and removed, right? And this is the one thing I like about noise. You can do nighttime scene, right? But the thing I would say is enlarge it so that you can see exactly how it's taking effect to your image, right? Are you softening the pixels too much? What's going on? So definitely take a look and see. All right, so we're going to just zoom right out of there. And I'm going to do this. And let's see here. What are we going to decide on here? This is a matter of preference, right? And sometimes I'll just go just like this so I can, and just focus on what's changing dramatically or not, right? So I think I kind of like landscape. Right? I definitely don't like that, so we can rule it out. Process of elimination. Landscape, save. And I'm working on a MacBook Air, so as you can see, this is moving pretty quickly. If you've got a bigger system, I mean, you're going to be flying through this probably a lot faster than I am. All right, here we go. And I'm just going to go in here, and I'm going to sync up here, because I think we, let's see where we're at here. Okay. 5th Street Bridge. All right. Well, we're looking for the 5th Street Bridge. Okay, here we go. So here's our image. And let me just sync just to be on the safe side. There's our corrected folder. I'm going to sync that out. Make sure there's nothing in there. Sync out our Puerto Rico. Make sure there's nothing in there. Sync this out. So all I'm doing is syncing, making sure I don't have any stragglers out there that I didn't pick up into the image, right? And there we go. Okay, we're good to go. Okay, so we've got about 5 minutes left. I'm just going to check in with you guys, see how you're doing. Looks like everybody's doing good, right? If you have any questions, feel free to contact me, right? And Twitter is really good. Email, keith@keithbdixon.com, right? Those mediums work very well. And if you're on Twitter, go ahead and follow me. I'll follow you back. We can create a network together. And, I'll share exactly I'll try to answer your questions exactly and share whatever I know. All right. Here's what I want you to know. The one message, if you take home anything, right? Image corrections are the foundation for building creative enhancement. So if it's going in wrong, probably not going to end up so great. I mean, that's just the reality. Um, so keep that in mind. The other thing is, hang on to the very end. I'm going to give you a discount code that you can use to save you 10% on Perfectly Clear. And I also want you to know that Perfectly Clear emails out a newsletter. And in that newsletter, I'll include some articles. I think I have a feature coming out for the month of June. So there's some feature photography. And I actually talked about some very interesting things in terms of, pursuing a career as a commercial photographer or photographer in general. So be on the lookout for that feature. And I just want to thank Jasmine at Perfectly Clear. She was very gracious and listening and asking questions and just really digging in deep, trying to figure out what information is going to be valuable to share. And that's the one thing I do have to praise Athentech for. Is they're definitely big on the education, not just on their product but just in general. They also have a blog that you can just pull a wealth of information from. There's some really good photographers on there that are doing some great things. And link up with me on Twitter. Let's talk. Hey Keith, we like this. We want to see more of that. Let me know. I'll definitely try to pull it together and make things happen for you guys. So let's talk about that code. We went through these lenses. I just want you guys to know if you have any questions about the lens choices, email me. Okay, here's that code I was telling you about. Keith BPC15, and you'll save 10%. So not only am I going to give you some tips, but I'm going to save you a little money as well. So that's the name of the game in photography. You have to save your money. If you definitely want to do this full time, you've got to be frugal. You've got to be smart about it. So anyway, that's all I have for you folks. And again, I just want to thank you for coming out and spending your time with me. I'm going to just bring these up again just in case you want to take a look so you don't have to go back. This month, for the month of June, we're actually going to be doing something called Follow Friday Frenzy. Run that Wednesday, and have a few other things that are basically that are going to be happening on social media. And be free to just jump in and comment and share whatever it is you want to do. We're here. The network is very reactive. So if you're trying to build your followers, you're trying to get some information, whatever the case may be, come on, join us. All right, that concludes our show. And if you have any questions, I'll be hanging out for a few minutes. And so feel free to definitely ask questions. Thank you. It's been fun.